because people were often talking to me about it. Publishers, editors saying, oh, your next project should be, maybe say something about shame, because I guess people just instantly assumed that I felt a lot of it because of Drunk Mom.
I'm Nathan Maharaj. This is Kobo in Conversation. My guest is the novelist and journalist Jowita Bydlowska. Her new book is Unshaming, a memoir of recovery, relapse, and what comes after. It's a frank, unflinching recounting of the years following the publication of her first book, the memoir Drunk Mom. And it's a thoughtful, fearless meditation on the concept of shame. Jowita Bydlowska, welcome to Kobo.
Thank you so much for having me, Nathan.
Because this new book, Unshaming, kind of stands on the shoulders of your first book, Drunk Mom, I want to kind of start, maybe biographically, maybe like bibliographically. I want to start by asking how your life changed for you after publishing that first book.
That's a great question. I just had this image of this book standing on the shoulders of Drunk Mom. I think I'm having actually a lot of reflections on that recently because having been publishing books for almost 15 years now, I realize what an extraordinary and unique thing it was to publish Drunk Mom and get the sort of publicity that I got, and it being a bestseller. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I just thought that this is what happens when you publish books in Canada. You laugh. So I thought, yes, of course, you go on TV and you do radio interviews and you're flown all over the country. That is not what happens, as I have learned after that, when I started publishing novels. And not because I started publishing novels. I think it was just a very unique experience. And even for Canada, I think it's possibly more American, I guess, to be celebrated to that extent. And so my life changed in a way that I felt like I was misled about book publicity, but then I had a really good reality check. And then I sort of found myself somewhere in there as a writer. And, especially recently, I got to ask my questions like, why am I really doing this? Do I want to be on TV or do I want to be doing interviews? And I ended up with, I actually really genuinely like writing. I don't like what happens after the book is published so much, but yeah, and that's, I think that's really good because I don't have these ideas. Like I know a lot of people who publish for the first time, they think of their covers and what's going to be author photo, and etc. And I never think of that. So I'm glad that I found this sort of safe and balanced place in writing itself.
What I was wondering about was how not just your life as a writer, but personally, because it was such a revealing memoir, and this is a revealing book as well. And I wonder, having had the experience of laying out in the world a great book, a beautifully written book, but it was also a book that was an exposing book, and I imagine it changed it kind of changed how you would meet people, how people would meet you.
Yeah, I mean, I was prepared for some of the reactions, and I'm talking about more negative reaction and the sort of, backlash of publishing a book about relapsing into alcohol and while raising a baby and all that stuff. So I was kind of not prepared for the positive reactions for people who, wrote to me and who found themselves in the book or who felt thankful for it or, used it as a warning. Some people got sober because of it, which was great. So there was definitely like a feeling of, and I talk about it in Unshaming a little bit, there was a feeling of kind of getting publicly shamed and overexposed and like just kind of not being able to, again, find myself. I feel like because I started writing fiction afterwards, it allowed me to put a wall between me and my audience, and I no longer was responsible for this, protagonist, main character, because I was writing about fictional characters. So that for me was a huge refuge. And I promised myself I will never ever write another memoir, and here we are. So that's But I certainly did believe myself, and I talk about it in Unshaming, to be this sort of almost public figure of, recovery and success in recovery. And, privately, that was not the case, and Unshaming touches on that. So there was also the feeling of sort of living a double life and being a hypocrite, and that's when shame came into play big time.
So getting into the new book, getting into Unshaming, it begins with a bike accident, a horrible bike accident. That made me wince. Can you tell me about that accident and why drop the reader in here? Why is that where we needed to meet you in this book?
Well, I mean, I think a good book needs a good hook, and I thought that was an interesting story to tell, and it also illustrated what I was grappling with, which was, I had this terrible accident. I come to, I don't have any memory of what happened the night before. I have this brilliant, horrible idea to sort of, seduce my partner. So it's like, there's that too. Like it's very, like it's uncomfortable because that's what it was like. But the discomfort lies not only in what happens, but in what happens with me internally. And I don't mean broken bonds. I mean the fact that I have to present a story to the world, first to emergency attenders and doctors, of what happened the night before. And I don't want to tell them that I drank because I am publicly sober person. And frankly, I'm actually a sober person to my loved ones and people that, that know me. And nobody has idea about how much I'm drinking or not even how much, but that I am drinking in the first place. So, and then in this particular incident, I go to emergency and I create this perfect story about going for a morning bike ride and getting the front wheel of my bike wedged between, two wooden boards and sort of catapulting myself forward and having this terrible thing happen to me. And it's funny because I write about something that happens in emergency where a doctor notices that my blood has coagulated. And she refuses to stitch me up because, it takes some time for blood to do that. And so clearly there's been more than like 2 hours that passed since the accident. And I just thought, like throwing the reader right into it and right into this sort of like both the accident, but also this internal, falling apart that's happening was a perfect way to start this book.
What follows from that is deception. Not just the deception of the doctor, but you have to go on and you talk about how you deceived like people close to you and friends and stuff. The thing I always love to feel when I'm reading memoir is, oh my God, I can't believe you're telling me this.
Yeah.
So tell me about that, about the web of kind of deception you wove, and then the choice to bring it out here and to lay it all out, including your inner state throughout it.
Yeah, so you're reading it in that way, and I'm writing it in a way where it says, oh my God, I can't believe I'm writing this and letting you know all this. And I said this not to be dramatic, but I certainly had a couple of rules with this particular book, because Drunk Mom was not supposed to be a memoir. It was supposed to be a work of fiction, so blissfully, I had some sort of like distance with it. But with this one, this was a very conscious decision to make it into a memoir. And my role was to write only things that hurt and not to shock the readers. But I thought this would get to the truth sort of faster. And it will be a much more authentic experience, especially when talking about shame, which, toxic shame, not healthy shame, but which is all based in hiding and secrecy and deception. Yeah, so I mean, I talk about this thing that was connected to the accident, which was that I had some dental work that had to be done because of the accident. And I didn't have money for dental work, and I'm a vain person. It doesn't matter. I mean, we're all very surface people, so I wanted to have a nice smile, and I thought that actually I think it was a friend who suggested, why don't you do a GoFundMe for your dental surgeries, and come out and say what happened. So I did. I wrote this little essay about this accident, and again, completely whitewashed. No mention of drinking, no mention of having no memory of what happened. I'm a fairly good writer, so I think it spoke to people in the way I presented the story, and people replied very quickly, donated money, and then it was also matched by I think it's called Woodcock Foundation. So because some writers, I guess, sent it to this foundation, they said, "Oh, there's a writer in dire straits, and she needs some medical help." So very quickly, I collected enough money to have these surgeries and these procedures. And it was a moment where I didn't think to myself back then, but later I was like, I literally just lied to the entire country. Like, I didn't just lie to my loved ones. I told people, I mean, I didn't quite lie, but I omitted a very important detail. And that detail was that this accident happened because of my drinking. And the reason why I omitted that detail was because I asked myself, if I saw this sort of GoFundMe and someone said, I had this terrible accident because I was, shooting up the night before or drinking, would I donate to it? And my answer was no. So maybe I'm more judgmental than most people, but I just thought if I am, reluctant about donating money to such cause, like, there's no way people are gonna, help me with this. So that's, I think that shows the level of deception that I got into, where I'm like, I am willing to lie to all of you to protect what? Dying privately? This is really what I was doing, right? So.
Yeah. Well, as you talk about judgment and how you would judge, what it brings to mind for me is the concept of relapse, and you talk about that in this book. What it made me think was we all do stuff we wish we didn't do. We all have things we wish we were better at. I years ago when my kids were little, I wished I wouldn't yell at them so much, and I would go long stretches not yelling at them, and then I'd yell at them, and that wasn't a relapse. Like, it didn't have stigma, but it was kind of the same thing. And that's kind of what came to mind as I was reading this book. Addicts don't kind of get that grace. Addicts get this stigma of relapse and falling off the wagon, and I guess I wanted to ask you, what does relapse mean to you? What does that word even signify?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's one of those things where I'm like, I think it's a ongoing investigation into it, but in terms of addiction, I sort of like, it's interesting because you're talking about yelling at your kids and how it's not the same, and it's not the same, but the feelings of failure are there, right? Like, you failed at this goal that you gave yourself. My goal is to stay sober and, be present for my son, for example, and I fail at that. So yeah, and to me, relapse is very, very connected to these feelings of shame, to these feelings of, like, a loss of identity, frankly. I'm not... So I've been told that I tend to be harsh on myself and I should give myself more grace, but I'm not that particularly forgiving when it comes to relapse and addiction and not being able to get grace. So because I know and I have seen how absolutely exhausted my closest loved ones were around me, and I certainly understood why there is stigma, just feeling like, well, how many times can you celebrate sobriety, right? So I talk about it in Unshaming, how for me it was very much connected to feelings of failure, this relapse and not being able to stay sober, and going to AA and hearing that I was not, didn't have spiritual experiences, that, like, I wasn't doing things correctly. So I was just finding shame everywhere, and that was sort of like self-perpetuating thing very much. So, that, like, the beginning of this book, I talk about the little prince. The drunkard says, the little prince says to the drunkard, "Why are you drinking? To forget what? I'm ashamed of drinking." I'm paraphrasing, but so this is like, it can go on forever, and it only sort of stopped for me when I started thinking of it like, what's the opposite of failure? It's not necessarily success, but it's hope, right? So I thought, okay, so if I relapse 20 times, that means I had hope 20 times. And that suddenly put a more positive spin on it and a lot less weight. And I think also relapse just sort of more philosophically. It's funny how it doesn't quite work for addiction memoirs, because we do expect a nice ending, and this is what happened with Drunk Mom. Not so much, because I never promised that I stay sober. I'm actually questioning it at the end of the book, but we assume that I'm doing well, and then we come back with this book, and so this is what happens after the happy ending.
What struck me about how you wrote about it in the book was, I think you described unhealthy shame as, was it unhealthy shame as a shame that is brought about because you've been untrue to yourself. Like you by the yardstick in the deepest cockles of your heart, you have come up short. Tell me about learning. Like that seems like a learning. That seems like a thing you had to realize.
Well, yeah. Again, so let's go back to your example about yelling.
Yeah.
I'm making you sound as if you're like.
Let's drag my stuff out.
Yes.
It's like you're already on the operating table. I'll hop up there with you. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, so like, it's motivating for you to yell at them less. So you work on it, and consciously, maybe you have a little reminder in your phone or something.
Yeah.
Right? That's all still within the confines of healthy and sort of reasonable. But the moment you start internally beating yourself up to the point where it sort of overwhelms you and overcomes you, I think that's when it starts to turn into something else, and that in itself can lead to another coping mechanism, which could be drinking. I don't know. I'm sort of exaggerating here, but it's basically like I talk actually in a book. I talk about shame also as this poisonous mushroom. I don't know if you've seen that. That show Last of Us, right? And it's all about these mushrooms spreading. So I actually had that image when I was thinking about how it spreads and how it becomes bigger. And zombies are another sort of great example. It's ever consuming, and the bigger it becomes, the harder it is to fight it.
Yeah.
But it is us feeding it all the time, because it's like obviously people can put shame on you, people can shame you, and they do. But if you don't feel it internally, you won't really feel it. And I'll give you another example. When, with Drunk Mom, there was a lot of, no one told me right to my face, but there were a lot of sort of ways in which I was, interviewed where I felt like it was almost expected of me to say, I'm really ashamed of what I've done.
Yeah.
And I apologize. And I did apologize. Obviously, the book is an apology to my son in many ways. And there were very harsh critics who said, I should be, I'm an exhibitionistic person. I'm trying to provoke, you couldn't pay me $1 million to release this book. Like there were all kinds of things. It's still Googleable, but through all this time, I didn't feel that shame internally. I actually felt proud of this book. I felt that as hard as it was and as unpleasant it was to hear some of those responses, I couldn't be shamed because it was not in me.
In many ways, Unshaming is a pandemic book, kinda. I wonder, did you set out to write a memoir deliberately, or did this kind of sneak up on you amidst other projects? I mean, as you said with Drunk Mom, that was, you were originally envisioning fiction that changed in development into memoir. I'm wondering if Unshaming showed up to you as your own story that you needed to tell, or did it sneak up while you were doing something else?
You answered my question. and it definitely. So this is my joke, because I said I have 2 memoirs and I didn't intend to write either of them. So I wanted to write a book about shame, and because people were often talking to me about it, and publishers, editors saying, your next project should be, maybe say something about shame, because I guess people just instantly assume that I felt a lot of it because of Drunk Mom, and I don't know. But so it's been suggested to me, and I thought that's a really, really great idea. So I set out to research it, and a lot of my research made it into footnotes. My background is in psychology as well, so I love all the psych info stuff and all the studies. So there's some research in the book. It's not just a memoir. But at some point, I did realize that I couldn't give it justice in a way. I'm like, there's no way I'll be able to get to the bottom of shame in a way that will, I just thought I would have to write about cultural shame. I would have to write about, I don't know, medical, like all kinds of shit. There was just too many things. Like I would have to talk to philosophers. And it wasn't because I was lazy. I just thought, I have access to probably mostly American thinkers and experts. I'm probably not going to travel to Japan because it's expensive, etc. My partner at the time was indigenous, and he talked to me about cultural shame and how it was introduced through colonialism, and especially in residential schools. And I was like, this is huge, this project. I can't do it. So, but I need an expert. So I thought, okay, well, I'm the expert because I have felt a lot of it because of my hypocrisy, because I was publicly a sober person and privately I was not. And as I said in the beginning, I thought I'm going to write about something that really hurts. And if it doesn't hurt, it's not authentic. And shame hurts. So I thought that would give me, both the expertise and perhaps more material, but a very long way of saying, no, I did not intend for this to be a memoir, but it is.
Well, so having answered that, yes, this kind of came about accidentally, I won't ask why this book had to be a memoir, because I think you've answered that. But I am thinking about literary craft and voice, because I get a sense that as a writer, you're really interested in that. And you're really interested in like kind of the sandpaper of the voice and the reader and like that point of friction. The voice for this book, ostensibly it's you, quote unquote you, because that's a memoir, but it's of course not. There's still an art to getting the voice on the page. Tell me about getting that voice captured in a way that felt true.
I don't know if this will answer, but writing Monster, which I brought a copy for you, but so writing a previous book, which I called autofiction, because it drew from some personal experiences and I just wanted to sort of play with that genre. I discovered, so when I said that what I most enjoy about writing is writing itself and the process of it. And what happened when I was writing Monsters, I suddenly felt this mythical flow that everybody talks about, you like certain words are coming out of you. Not all of them make it into the final draft, obviously, but there's this feeling of euphoria and joy and pain too, of course. But I found such pleasure and such like place in the writing itself that like it just felt like another door open. So so I think I did that with Monster. It felt more mine than Drunk Mom did in many ways. So then I think when I sat down to Unshaming, like, I've had enough doors open to be able to sort of pull this one out. And it was interesting because I reread parts of Drunk Mom, and I'm like, that's a different person writing it. And obviously, I was a different person than Chu, and I had a lot fewer, not as good. See, and here I am screwing it up. My English was probably not as fluent as it is now. So I don't know. In many ways, this is probably more mature and more of the voice that I feel like it represents me closer than the previous ones. So
to my reading, there's this other character in the book, and you've spoken about the footnotes a bit. They are abundant, they're informative. As a reader, I felt like they were like at a different temperature. It felt like every time I got to the footnotes, it was like there was I found a cold draft in the room. And it was an interesting sensation because it was a different voice.
Did it take you out of the story, or?
No, I mean, I am in many ways a very naive reader in that I don't come with a lot of expectations. I kind of want a book to teach me how to read it. So there's a footnote, and I go, okay, I'm reading the footnote.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Like I don't know what's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes if they would go a little longer, I would think, am I so interested in this? I would be pulled back sometimes. I'd be like, I kind of want to go back. I want to get back to the flow of the narrative. And so I felt like the book, the footnotes were this counterpoint. They were this contrast. I guess I wanted to ask you about that as a literary device.
I love that question. So I have no problem writing something that flows between like research and sort of personal writing. I think I can do that. Maybe some of my editors will disagree, but actually I don't think so. And I know that footnotes have a bad rep because people say, footnotes are there because the writer didn't know what to do with text, and especially with this kind of text, which is more informative and so on. But I did what everybody else does. I asked a question on social media. I said, "How do people feel about footnotes?"
Yeah.
Before like deciding how to treat them or how to treat that sort of more dense information. And it was, evenly split 50-50, hate them, love them, their mark of unexperienced writer, blah, blah, blah. So, yes, I made that decision. And then with my editor, Doug Pepper of Signal, he really liked them. And he suggested a couple of different things. He goes, leave them as they are, or we can put them at the end of the book. So our joke was that you get 2 books in one, and you can totally read it without the footnotes.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because here goes another like judgment. I don't love them myself. Like when I come across footnotes, I'm like, really? Like, do I have to? And and then using them. So I really wanted to do it so that it wouldn't be too painful for the readers who don't like them.
Yeah.
I like hearing that you were a little bit like fed up with them here and there, because I'm like, maybe they went on for too long. But they also allowed, and I only do it a few times, I did it a lot more before editing, they allowed to sort of break this fourth wall a little bit, which like, oh, hi, I'm there. Because I even like, I don't know, I have a line where I talk about, there are no people who feel no shame, and I have this friend, Shannon, who always claims that she has no feelings of shame. So I said, there are people who feel no shame. Footnote says, hi, Shannon. So, it was just a little like, and I think also another reason was too, and that was more conscious, is that I knew that this book was so heavy in places where I'm like, I kind of want to give people a bit more breathing room. And it's actually, to me, it's the heaviest in the parts where there are no footnotes, but I just wanted to set up like a different reading experience.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me as you were talking right now was I think what I was feeling as I read them was the footnotes exist in a space, because they're outside of the flow of the narrative of the memoir. They're kind of in a space that's above any question of shame or not shame or anything. They're just completely outside of it. They're a disembodied voice, when so much of this book is about being embodied.
Yeah, and that's funny. Now I'm going to think out loud too, because when you were just saying that, I thought, I wonder if they're part of if there's something to do with shame that for me to have them, because I'm writing about very shameful experiences.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just a little bit of showboating that like, hi guys, I'm not that stupid. I actually did some research. I don't know. I've never thought of it, but I'm like, maybe there's something to it, right? Because it's like, I mean, memoirs, I think they have a better rep now, but they don't have the best rep sometimes. It's like, especially, and I saw this with Drunk Mom, where there was this word confessional thrown at me all the time as if it was like a derogatory thing. She can't write anything, so she's writing about herself, right? So maybe, I don't know, maybe there was something to that. I just wanted to say very quickly that I did audio for this book, which was a fantastic experience. I didn't think I was going to be able to do it, and then I thought like my accent will be too distracting, etc. But hilariously, we didn't know how to deal with the footnotes, because you have to read the story, and so I'm like, should I read them in a higher voice, or like do we like make some sort of noise before they're read? So they are just in a text, and they actually weirdly work. So
you mentioned that shame is an emotion that doesn't exist if not for other people, and this is a book full of other people around you, and yet you're kind of alone in the midst of it. Can you talk a little bit about that division, that like the aloneness among many?
I refer to myself as addict, so I'm going to talk about just my experience, but I think addicts can be, and many are, very manipulative, and we're very much about control, because we are in situation where there is no control whatsoever. So, and this is why there's lying and deception and hiding. I've spoken to a lot of addicts who talk about how, the substance itself was as important as the ritual of obtaining it or preparing it, right? So it's a whole thing, like it's a whole little universe, which is super lonely, right? And you can't let anybody into that. I guess I've never had an experience of being in active addiction with somebody else, like relapsing with somebody else. So I don't know what that's like. But even then, I think it is a very lonely existence. And it's just you, yourself, and and that's it. In the addiction, so yes, physically you can have people around. Like, I mean, you can have them in your bed, and you're still are keeping this thing to yourself. And there's a weird, like, perverse pleasure in that. It's almost like, I have something that nobody knows about, and it's mine. Like, the what's that character from the Lord of the Rings, Gollum, with his treasure.
He's got his precious.
Yeah, precious, right? So, yeah, and then the idea of shame being about other people as well, even though it's an internal emotion. What you feel shame when you feel that you will be judged, right? Obviously. And whether that person's real, whether, like in my case, it's my son who not just judges me, but depends on me and watches me very closely, or if it's even something as, like, imaginary as your grandfather who passed away, but you think, oh God, if my grandma only knew what I'm doing, she would be so ashamed of me, right? So, so could be, a very real thing, or it could be somebody imaginary. That's the sort of thing that hopefully pulls you back or stops you even, so because I called people who are around you and who help you unshame your witnesses. And, so those are the same people who witness your shame, but they also have to witness your unshaming. And once you start telling the truth, there's really no reason to hide, and it becomes a lot easier to get rid of it. In a book, there's a point where I become so lonely, it's almost like a physical feeling, and I'm trying to recall it even now, where people do leave me physically. My son leaves, he stays with his father temporarily, but still. My partner at the time goes to see his mom in Calgary. It's still there's no one around, and pandemic is such a fantastic, like, it's almost like a vivarium, right? Like, these things happen in this, like, enclosed space and time. So it's super, super lonely, and when you get to that point where there's no one around, there's no one I need to hide from, I can just go either way, and I do find some respite in a dog that I have, a little puppy that I start to sort of speak to its ear. I just say please over and over and over, and not really what happened, obviously, but it's almost like a form of prayer, and he becomes sort of my first witness, and then from there, things get better. But yeah, like that little creature was sort of like the first bright thing in my loneliness. I was like, oh, maybe I can do this differently. So, yeah.
You write later on in the book, if it wasn't for Anya and her boundaries, I'm not sure I'd even be here. Mm-hmm. What did you gain from having people around you who would draw lines like that, who would hold you to account, who would, like, push you away in a way that helped you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky, or I've been manipulative enough that I haven't had a lot of interventions, that show interventions. But my sister once wrote me a letter. I have been sat down maybe 3 times in my life, so it's like that wasn't very explosive. Like,
you haven't had like all your friends and relations showing up in one room and saying, now Jowita.
Yeah, no, but it's there's something the reason why I call myself manipulative is because I'm like, I kept people apart enough to not allow for that to happen. That's where that perverse control comes in, right? That's the sort of manipulation and the secrecy and hiding again. But I do think that it is very good for people with different substance use disorders to keep them accountable and to confront them in a loving way, of course, as long as you're ready to help them as well. Because a lot of the time, addicts do get confronted, they get scolded, and then they're suddenly alone with their, with all their problems, and no one's there to sort of support them through it. I've been very lucky that I had a lot of supportive people in my life, but Anya was one of the few people who put such a hard boundary. There was no bending it. Like, I couldn't convince her to forgive me. I couldn't make a joke out of it. I couldn't make light of it. She was just like, I'm done. And I was so indignant. I was so mad. I said, I will never speak to this person again. But obviously, looking back, I'm like, that was one of the best things that happened for my addiction and for our friendship. So thank you for picking up on that. No one's ever asked me that, but that's a good question.
Well, it sounds to me like what Anya did was, as you say, an addict is a manipulator. And Anya refused, by refusing to be manipulated, she was also denying the addict in you. Just saying, you'll have to be something else because the manipulator won't do here. So be somebody else.
Yeah, and I mean, privately, she had also lost somebody like a year prior too. So she was fed up with, you know, the sad thing is that, this is not my line, but addiction is suicide in installments.
Yeah.
So watching your lovely friend kill themselves in front of you, like nobody wants to see that. So you're like, I don't want to see it, and you're on your own, which sounds very tough and mean, but it can really help too.
Yeah. You write in English. You write a lot in English. You've written several books, but your first language is Polish. In your writing process, does that all happen in English? Are there parts where you're like, the right way to say this in Polish is this, and I will figure out the English idiom later?
Very rarely, but certainly there is that, like where I just think, it's usually like idioms and expressions where I'm like, God, like how would I say this in English? I'm so grateful for the fact that I have an experience of writing in second language, because it really it gave me discipline. It, with Drunk Mom, my vocabulary wasn't that extensive, and I really had to be economical with my words, and a lot of people said, oh, this sounds like reporting and it's a certain I did develop that style further, but it was, what I saw as hindrance and insecurity became opportunity, and certainly something that, hopefully makes me stand out a little bit. But yeah, and I have this image always of, oh my God, what is that thing called? Is it light tower? Like when you...
Lighthouse?
Lighthouse. There you go. There you go. This is perfect. I have an image of this lighthouse sort of with this searchlight looking for a word. And it's just, I've actually written about it and trying to find that word. And sometimes it just isn't there in English. And it's very much there in Polish. So, yeah.
Well, to that point of translation, there are these two trips you take to Poland in the book that you recount. They kind of stand out because they are something else. We are going somewhere else in the book. I felt like they could have stood on their own. They could have been the memoir. It could have been a different book with these two trips to Poland. Tell me about including these trips. What did they bring to drop in there into the book that way?
Yeah, I wanted, well, first of all, they did happen in that period of time that the memoir happens, so I had to include them, but I also wanted to sort of compare them and contrast a little bit, because, it's funny, going back to your home country, this, it's, you go back to your sort of identity, there's first language, as we talked about, and somewhere underneath that there's authenticity, which is what you need to get rid of shame. So in a way, it was very conscious decision to have the first trip to Poland, which is an absolute disaster, and it happened in the middle of the pandemic. Everything about it was horrible, but I just wanted to show what happens when you are at your sickest, when you are. I wasn't even ashamed. I was just like an animal. I was feral when I went, and lots of shameful things happen. And I'm like, again, I have to sort of talk about it in order to sort of give the full experience of the experience of unshaming. And then the second trip is almost it is the exact opposite. And I repair some of the relationships which I ruined with the first trip, and I find sort of my footing again. And I have never written, I guess, travel writing, and it was a really fun experience. I had this weird thing that all the things in the world have to happen in New York. I don't know if you've heard this. All the novels, everything's and Toronto is like lesser New York. So I thought I really wanted to take people somewhere out of this story, but also to show where I come from, maybe where all of this had originated.
I wonder if you had to, you're living between cultures, Poland is a different place. Newsflash, it's not like here. And I wonder sensibilities around stigma. And I wonder, as you're physically traveling back to a place, Was there a sense of that line moving? You could call it the shame line if we really want to like hammer a theme, but like that point of, of where stigma lies, and when have I crossed that? And is it different here than there?
Yeah. I don't know, but there was a feeling of like when I went to Poland the first time, like this isn't real. Like there was this idea of like, here I can be whoever the hell I want. I can perform this, cosmopolitan, this like lady about the world figure. Like I can be just somebody else. I don't have to have the burden of shame, but also people watching me and people judging. Like I'm speaking in everything about it is different. Like it's not real. It didn't feel real. It was sort of like Alice in Wonderland, just like really twisted. Yeah. And yet, it's another form of hiding, because I don't know who went to Poland the first time. Like I don't know that person.
You write about how contentment, the feeling of contentment, is a scary thing. What does that mean?
Oh, it's so, about when you get what you really want, the first thought is, what happens if I lose it? At least for me. And it's not that I'm a pessimist, but I'm always like, it's very hard to hold on to joy and good feeling. And maybe it's just a personality thing, but I feel like it's hard to stay in it, because you have to stay in it and be present in it. So I'm immediately worried about losing it.
Yeah. Is it also perhaps if desire is driving you, if wanting is driving you, then getting what you want is kind of a death to it.
Yeah, no, and we can even tie it back with my thought about, writing versus publishing, right? Yeah. So it's like, the being in desire, being sort of, I don't know, getting to this point is kind of a lot more fun than finishing and having this product. And there's certainly something to it. It's funny. I don't think I've ever thought of happiness as like some sort of finality, but it is. Yeah.
Jowita, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you. This was great.
I have been speaking with Jowita Bydlowska, author of Unshaming, a memoir of recovery, relapse, and what comes after. Find all her books at kobo.com/conversation. There's a link in the show notes. Follow in your podcast player to catch every episode. And if you enjoyed this one, share it with somebody shamelessly. There's no shame about books. Kobo in Conversation was produced this time by me, Nathan Maharaj, and hosted by me, Nathan Maharaj. Thank you for listening.